The Trump Agenda. I'm David Webb in for Sean tonight. President Trump taking aim at allegations of bias at the FBI and blasting the fake news dossier. We'll talk about that in a moment. The president tweeting earlier today, wow, at Fox and Friends, dossier is bogus. Clinton campaign, DNC-funded dossier. FBI cannot, after all this time, verify claims in dossier of Russia-Trump collusion. FBI tainted. And they use this crooked Hillary pile of garbage as the basis for going after the Trump campaign. President Trump's tweet appears to be in reaction to reports that during his closed-door congressional testimony, FBI Director or Deputy Director Andrew McCabe failed to specify which portions of the dossier the FBI claims to have corroborated. There's also a report in McCabe plans to retire in 2018 amid mounting criticism from Congress. Constitutional law expert Alan Dershowitz weighing in on the scandal, saying that maybe McCabe should have recused himself for any Clinton-related investigations, given his conflict of interest. Watch this.
Well, first of all, everybody tells me who knows McCabe and has worked in the FBI that he's a very decent guy and was an excellent deputy director. Having said that, he should have recused himself immediately from any investigation involving Hillary Clinton because of his wife's connections to Hillary Clinton. When you're investigating a presidential candidate, whether it be Hillary Clinton or President Trump, you have to be Caesar's wife. You have to be above reproach. You have to make sure not only there are no conflicts, but there are no perceived conflicts. Not only is there no bias, but there's no perception of bias. And he didn't pass that test.
And in other big news, the Washington Post now reporting that House Intelligence Committee Chairman Devin Nunes is talking with other Republican lawmakers about writing a report next year that would expose alleged, I say alleged, FBI corruption. Also tonight, a stunning report from Politico. James Baker, the FBI's top lawyer, was in contact with liberal journalist David Corn of Mother Jones. And he did this in the weeks before the outlet broke the very first news story about the existence of the anti-Trump dossier. Joining us with reaction, core national spokesman and conservative pundit, my friend Niger Innes, Fox News legal analyst Greg Jarrett, and Daily Caller reporter Kerry Pickett. By the way, all friends, great to see you here. Greg, I'm going to go to you first on this, and let's talk about this dossier for a moment. We'll put a pause on the politics and look at what you would do within the process of vetting information given to the FBI, this dossier, before you would put it to use.
Look, the FBI receives a lot of fake documents all the time. It's up to them to vet it. You can't use it in a court of law unless you've verified its authenticity and confirmed its contents. If the FBI used this dossier in an affidavit in support of a search warrant to spy on the Trump associates, that's a fraud on the court. That's a crime. But you back up several months, and apparently this dossier was also used to launch the Trump-Russia investigation. And they apparently did little or nothing in the way of verifying its contents. So think about this. Funded by Hillary Clinton's campaign and the Democratic National Committee, which, by the way, is a crime under the Federal Election Campaign Act, they used this document to then spy and launch an investigation on Hillary Clinton's political opponent. It's beyond the pale of criminal negligence. And some of the people who did this, including perhaps Comey, McCabe, James Baker, Peter Strzok, and others, should be held accountable criminally if appropriate.
All right, Greg, you're talking about this legal aspect, and the process is important. Kerry, the process, however, on the Hill is a little different. You're down there every day talking to the congressmen and senators. So the political aspect of this comes into play. Given what Greg just said, given that Comey admitted that he leaked information, which also is an issue that you've talked about before, Greg, what about the dossier and the use of this in the congressional point of view?
Well, what's interesting here, David, is that anytime I have gone to the Hill and spoken to the lawmakers that are leading these investigations, whether in the Senate or on the House side, you've had Democrats, for example, who have been preparing almost for, and they will never say this publicly, but they've been essentially preparing for what could be an impeachment. Because anytime I have gone up to them and asked them, well, what about the conflict of interest here? What about the Podesta group? What about the issue that the dossier is not verified? The answers have always been, I haven't heard about that yet, or that's not important. On the Republican side, however, you go up to them and say, well, what about, say, the Donald Trump Jr. emails and so on and so forth? They've been more on the defensive, looking to say, what can they do to defend Donald Trump to make sure that he doesn't get impeached? And remember, how did this start? This started off with, oh, my goodness, the Russians ended up meddling in our elections. We have come so far from that, David.
All right, so that's the Hill view, the legal view. Now turning to Niger Innes, our friend out there in Las Vegas. Big gambling out of Democrat quarters, Niger. Kind of fits your town of Las Vegas. But the media has been carrying this, be it Greg's points about the legal aspect of this. We've talked about the process here, I think, more than I've seen on most media, and Greg explained that. Kerry looks at it at the Hill and what they're proposing. What about the media's handling of this?
The media, the establishment media, outside, of course, of Fox News, which I actually don't consider to be establishment, has been egregious in their silence. The Washington Post has this on the masthead, democracy dies in darkness. Well, no, actually, democracy died in darkness with the creation of this dossier. You know, for these never-Trumpers out there and these left-wing folk that hate Trump and suffer from Trump derangement syndrome, I just want them to think about this hypothetical analogy. All right, it's 2008. We all jumped into a time machine. It's 2008. And the John McCain for President campaign prepares a dossier using a former British spy and using intelligence gathered on Senator Obama by Israeli intelligence. That information, that dossier then, is passed off to the Bush Justice Department and/or FBI, and they use this dossier to not only wiretap Senator Obama, but to launch an investigation on Senator Obama. The outrage would be deafening. They would be calling for John McCain to not only be impeached, but be given the death penalty. And so the deafening silence by the establishment media, and the fact is, it's more than deafening silence. They are actually going along with the talking points on supposed Russian collusion based on a dossier, and their entire case is built on a house of cards.
All right, so, we'll stay on the facts here, Greg. Let me go back to you on this. And, who can be charged? Because in the end, whether it's the scenario that Niger used, which is a scenario, or the reality, more to the reality of what's happening now, you talk about how you cannot produce fraudulent documents to a court. Right. A judge can hold you in contempt. Who can be charged in this scenario, in your opinion?
Well, you can start with the people who appear to have exonerated Hillary Clinton for political purposes. That would be obstruction of justice. If that involved Peter Strzok, who apparently changed the critical wording in the exoneration statement, you might also include McCabe as well as James Baker. We just don't know. Congress needs to get to the bottom of it. Wish there were a second special counsel to investigate Clinton, Comey, Lynch, McCabe, Baker, Strzok.
Then you have John Orr, his wife, who worked for Fusion.
Bruce Orr, yeah.
Bruce Orr, rather, his wife. You've got Andrew Weissman. There's a cacophony of problems here in the sound that's coming out.
Which is exactly why you need a second special counsel. I'm not sure that Jeff Sessions of the Department of Justice, with so many Obama holdovers still there, is capable of actually conducting a fair, objective, neutral investigation. I think there needs to be a second special counsel, and there's more than enough reason and evidence to demand one.
All right, Kerry, so, we don't need the Constitution explained anymore, at least not on this show. Sure. To the audience, about what it takes for impeachment. But you were talking about charges, potential charges, or an idea of who could be charged, and back to Washington, D.C. and impeachment and the politics of this. We're ending the year and starting a new year. Is this going to change for the Democrats in Washington?
I got to tell you, as far as a special counsel being called, right now you already have members of Congress calling for an investigation into the corruption right now in the DOJ into the FBI, looking to purge the problems going on over at the FBI. So I just can't see a special counsel or second special counsel being called right now.
Except the problem is you can't investigate yourself. The FBI is a division of the Department of Justice, and if the corruption extended beyond the FBI into the Department of Justice, with so many people still there, you can't trust them to investigate themselves, which is why I've long argued for a second special counsel. And in fact, members of the House Judiciary Committee have sent a letter to the Attorney General demanding a second special counsel just for this.
Something that Darrell Issa actually has called for as well.
Yes.
Yeah, all right, so let's bring Niger back in this. Again, Niger, big gamble for the Democrats. You're hearing your fellow panelists talk about this legal perspective, political perspective. But, you know, if they were to go to a special counsel, and given the IG's reports that have come out, do you think a special counsel brings us there, or does it prolong and delay the process and the constant back and forth partisan politics, which by the way, hinders the president's agenda?
If you have a choice of firing Robert Mueller and ending that special counsel as opposed to bringing on a second special counsel, I lean heavily towards bringing on the second special counsel. Look, Mueller and the Democrats are not going to stop with this investigation. A person recently said, I forget who the commentator said it is merely just the beginning of the or the end of the beginning. So I think this is what Mueller's investigation is going to continue. It's going to go long past 2018. So I think you need a select and distinct special counsel that can examine the corruption within the FBI and examine how Hillary Clinton partisans, Democrat partisans, refuse to investigate her email and her emails being hacked by foreign entities. I mean, talk about collusion and the fact that they did nothing to the Clinton campaign and to Hillary Clinton herself, except for, smack her on the wrist. That needs to be investigated, as well as what I think is the most egregious, what we've all been talking about, which is active collaboration, it seems, between a presidential campaign of one party, a sitting government in power, presidency in power, to wiretap a presidential candidate. I mean, my God, I think that's a little bit bigger than even breaking into a hotel room in Watergate.
All right, so let's take that idea to the protection of citizens with Niger, and we're going to go around the table on this one for about 30 seconds each. Greg, to you, whether it's wiretapping, what is potentially, who could be charged. When it comes to special counsel, is there anything that can be done prior to that? Is there anything that the Inspector General can do within the FBI or the whistleblower issue, which is on the table, to actually bring this out?
The Inspector General can only make findings, which can turn into a referral for prosecution, but generally they don't do it. The problem with the IG is they're rather toothless, always have been. It's a historical fact. What you need is a prosecutor. And again, I don't think there are people that I would have confidence in the Department of Justice to ferret out criminality among themselves or the FBI.
So, Kerry, is there anyone on both sides sitting down there in D.C. that you hear from that you say, you know what, they would lead a straightforward investigation into this, a finding of fact, as Greg talks about?
David, as far as I can see right now, that they are simply looking to circle the wagons of their own parties. In this case, Republicans looking to protect Trump and Democrats looking to go after Trump. That's all that's going on right now. All
right, we've got to pause it there, but never a pause for our friends right here. Niger Innes out in Las Vegas, Greg Jarrett here in the studio, and Kerry Pickett. Great to see you guys. Thank you.
Thank you. Happy New Year, folks.
All right, we're starting off on a day right after Christmas, right back into the tough news. Coming up, President Trump, he's having a very successful year in office, but you wouldn't know that if you only listen to liberal mainstream media. We'll show you some of the most extreme, and I do mean extreme, examples of liberal media bias. Stay with us as this special edition of Hannity continues. And welcome back to this special edition of Hannity. 2017 has been a very productive year for President Trump. capped off this month after he signed that massive historic tax cut into law. Of course, tax reform is not the president's only major accomplishment. He successfully appointed a qualified originalist to the Supreme Court. He's rolled back dozens of Obama-era regulations. He's cleared the way for completion of the Keystone XL pipeline and so much more. But if you watch the mainstream media, you'd probably have a very different and a skewed picture of the Trump presidency. Let's take a look at some of the worst moments. Yeah, I said worst moments over the past year.
I have a whole lot to say about this president's increasing erratic behavior over the past week or so.
We have an Archie Bunker-in-chief who is disrespecting American Indians and making classless jokes from the podium.
Is this president trying to impersonate Hugo Chavez, Recep Tayyip Erdogan, Vladimir Putin?
Apparently, the president gets 2 scoops. You know, everyone else around the table gets 1, and no word if there were sprinkles.
At the dessert course, he gets 2 scoops of vanilla ice cream with his chocolate cream pie instead of the single scoop for everyone else.
He's gained weight, according to these sources. He doesn't trust people around him. He's withdrawing. Not a good picture.
He's a racist. Okay? He came proverbially as close as you could possibly come to shouting in a rally the N-word. That's what he did down there.
Donald Trump, again, being a schmuck. He looked like a thug. He looked like a goon. You look at the handshake. You look at this. Just what a thug. And you have somebody inside the White House that the New York Daily News says is mentally unfit, that people close to him say is mentally unfit, that people close to him during the campaign told me had early stages of dementia.
I mean, amazing. What you saw is not just a mirage. In fact, according to a study from the Media Research Center, 91% of Trump-related coverage from ABC, CBS, and NBC's evening newscasts has been negative. And despite all of this, the Trump agenda is moving forward, and an Obamacare repeal and replace, well, that could be next. Joining us now, Republican strategist Noel Nickpour, Fox News contributors Ellen Ratner and Deneen Borelli. Ladies, great to see you all. A very belated Merry Christmas to you, Ellen and Noel. I've seen Deneen enough in the last week.
Hey, David.
You know, I got to tell you something, Ellen. I'm going to go to you first on this. You and I have done a lot of analysis over the years together. Where was the policy disagreement with Donald Trump in what we just played for the audience?
Well, first of all, I think that you're not showing what he tweeted out when he goes after people. I think that, you know, he's supporting the economy, but a lot of those rules and regulations and policies were under Barack Obama. And I think that you were not talking at all about our standing in the world community. And I know you think these people say terrible things, but they probably said, the right wing probably said terrible things about Barack Obama,
but Ellen,
too.
My question was, where was the policy disagreement in there? And I've watched a ton of this. Come on, you and I know this. I watch this daily. I'm fine with policy disagreements. I don't like the ad hominem attacks.
I don't either, actually, believe it or not. I think that when you attack somebody and you say the kinds of things that are said, that's not appropriate. There's plenty that I disagree with President Trump about, and it has to do with policy.
All right, so Noel, let's bring you in on this. You're a Republican strategist. From the strategy point, does this help the Democrats? And if so, how? With this constant left-wing barrage on Trump's character and ad hominem attacks, rather than pointing out policy failures, when I just read a list of accomplishments that are campaign promises he made, he kept. Whether you agree or disagree with them, anyone out there, he's kept his promise.
Right. And you know what? They just will not let President Trump have a victory lap, no matter what. And you know what? You know, Trump really did do this. What he said is what he fulfilled. He fulfilled promises, unlike what President Obama did, which is he got health care through, but it was riddled with low enrollment. You couldn't keep your own doctor. And then now the premium increase is what we're dealing with. And President Trump, when he campaigned on creating jobs, You can check that off. He's about to put money in middle-class Americans' pockets. You can check that off. So he's fulfilling his promises. And what he gets from mainstream media is constant negative. And I think that's a lot of the reason why Donald Trump has to tweet, so he can get his own message out there, because it's been negated so much from mainstream media.
All right, Deneen Borelli's here in the studio with me. Deneen, I asked Noel about how this helps the Democrats. On the other side, the Republicans and the Republican messaging, the president's successes. There have been a number of successes. They're not the sexy stories. They don't get the headlines, the tweets. I even agree with Ellen that the back and forth off policy is not healthy. But where do the Republicans take this next? How do they tout changes in GDP? Expansion of the economy? How do they do this effectively and sell it even to the underserved communities, no matter what ethnicity they are?
Well, the Republicans need to do that. They need to take that message out there to Americans, to all Americans. I think it's great when President Trump goes out and does a rally for the people, making that FaceTime with Americans, because Americans want to hear from the president. They want to know what's going on with the agenda, and he is delivering on his promises, and that's what the media does not like. The media cannot control President Trump. He is able to go around them. He's called them out how many times? Numerous times. Fake news, very fake news, because the media refuses to talk about his accomplishments that he has been able to make in 1 year, and that is going to help turn Americans' lives around. From tax cuts, lower regulations, these are the issues, the policies that he ran on, that he talked about, and how it's going to be America first and the forgotten men and women. That's what he's putting first.
All right, so let's go back to Ellen Ratner. And Ellen, you've been in the media business a long time. You and I have watched and analyzed campaigns, and we look at what's coming ahead and what they can use. What can the left use effectively if the economy continues to expand? The third quarter over 3.3% growth, the market's at highs, home mortgage insurance interest or home mortgage interest growing 18-year highs, constant changes, and all on the upswing since the president was elected and since he was installed.
Well, first of all, I think that we have to look over the long term and to see if his policies really work. And number two, I think we have to look, for instance, at Obamacare, which he wants to get rid of. But even though they had less advertising and less time to enroll, over 8 million people enrolled this time. So the fact is that Obama policies are still working, and people might not like that. You might not like it, but the facts are the facts.
Okay, well, here's a fact for you, Ellen. Over 80% of the people paying the Obamacare penalty make under $50,000. That's IRS data. By rolling that back, combined with the doubling of the standard deductions for people in lower income brackets, they get to keep a larger portion of their money. They don't get hit with a tax. And to be fair, the Republicans now have to deal with portability and other issues to help the insurance industry and healthcare providers provide a better rate. So if that's the Obamacare working when premiums are going up 200%, 300% almost in Arizona, when there are rate hikes requested for next year by insurance companies starting as low as 25 up to 60%, how are those policies going to be, how are they going to use them as Democrats when people are looking at the reality of what they pay?
Well, I think we're going to have to see how it does play out and whether people really do get health insurance coverage or not. And that's going to see. We're going to see why in Congress do they want to help people with their premiums, because they know that it's a very popular program.
Well, popularity is to be judged by the politics. Noel, quick 15 seconds. Do the Democrats have a case to make next year?
You know what? Here's what I think. I think that how can they be critical if they weren't part of the process? And I really resent the fact that the Democrats are very upset about a lot of the policies that we're getting through, or Trump's getting through, when they did not participate, and they don't want to participate in the process. And when we come up on health care and we're going to do that, they need to have a seat at the table, or they can't complain the next time around.
Deneen, real quick, are the Democrats going to play ball with the Republicans, Or is it going to be Schumer crying and Pelosi beating him up with Armageddon?
Well, unfortunately, the Republicans didn't rip Obamacare out from the roots, and now they own it. So the left is clearly going to blame Republicans for the failures that are to come. As we've seen, the rates have gone up. People have lost their health insurance, or they just can't afford it. Republicans will be blamed for it, and the Democrats are just going to sit back and watch. They didn't help on tax reform.
Well, the Republicans better sell success well. That's what I have to say on that. Ladies, thank you very much. Up next on the special edition of Hannity, the Trump administration and Ambassador Nikki Haley. She's doing a great job at the UN. They're taking an axe to the United Nations operating budget. We'll tell you how much they're cutting and why it is sending a major message to the UN that should not be ignored. Ambassador John Bolton and Dr. Bill Parker weigh in. That and more on this special edition of Hannity, continuing next. Welcome back to a special edition of Hannity. President Trump's America First agenda in full effect. Get this. After the United States negotiated a $285 million cut to the United Nations bloated budget. Of course, this comes as President Trump and U.S. Ambassador Nikki Haley blasted, and I mean blasted, the UN General Assembly for holding a vote to rebuke the United States' decision to move its embassy in Israel to Jerusalem. Watch this.
The United States will remember this day in which it was singled out for attack in the General Assembly for the very act of exercising our right as a sovereign nation. We will remember it when we are called upon to once again make the world's largest contribution to the United Nations. And we will remember it when so many countries come calling on us, as they so often do, to pay even more and to use our influence for their benefit.
The United States, the people that live here are great citizens that love this country. They're tired of this country being taken advantage of, and we're not going to be taken advantage of any longer.
By the way, as an added note, Guatemala now announcing that they will move their embassy into Jerusalem as well. So I wonder when the vote's coming up in the UN on that. In the wake of their anti-Israel, anti-American positions, and with the U.S. contributing more, and I say more, to the UN's budget than any other nation, should the Trump administration take even more financial steps to put them on notice? Joining us now, former United States Ambassador to the United Nations and Fox News contributor John Bolton, as well as COO of the East-West Institute and a retired U.S. naval officer, Dr. Bill Parker, who, by the way, author of a great book that I have on my shelf and I read, Guaranteeing America's Security in the 21st Century. You two gentlemen have been at work, whether in the military, in the ambassadorial corps, and in administrations doing this job. First to you, Ambassador Bolton. Great to see you again. I know where you stand on this, but I want to hear it from you. I think I know where you stand on this. What about this cut? What is it really, and what does it mean?
Well, this particular cut was baked in the cake before the Jerusalem vote, but certainly it's worthwhile to get the budget lower even by that amount. But I think it provides the Trump administration with an excellent pivot point to look at the larger question of what elements of the UN system are functioning successfully and what are not, and to move away from the system of international taxation, in effect, that we're under now, where, as you say, we pay 22% of the regular budget, 28% of the even larger peacekeeping budget. And just decide that we're going to contribute voluntarily to what we think works and either substantially reduce or zero out of those programs and offices that we don't think work. Now, this would be like a tsunami through the UN system, but if we could carry through with it, it would actually make it more efficient and more effective.
All right, now there's an ambassador I know. He might have been on this show with us, or he might even be here now, Dr. Parker, who said that sometimes in diplomacy, your choices aren't that good. I'm using the cleaned up version of this. Do you think this sends a signal to the United Nations?
Look, the United Nations is a very important body. There's no doubt about that. Very important. But at the end of the day, efficiency and effectiveness matters. And the reality is, as Ambassador Bolton just pointed out, 22% of that total funding came from the United States, where 9% came from Japan and 8% came from China, and the rest are much smaller. So to say we need to get more efficient and more effective, I think is spot on. We do need to take a good hard look at that. But we also need to realize how important the United Nations is to the overall body of the globe.
All right, so Ambassador Bolton, as I mentioned, Guatemala now, they're announcing, and other nations are indicating they may do this, in moving their embassies to Jerusalem. Is there another story here? Have you discerned anything from this?
Well, look, the government of Israel has been working on this for some time, and I'm sure they're going to try and take advantage of it. I think other countries may make that decision as well. I think the president's biggest problem, having recognized Jerusalem as the capital of Israel, his biggest problem in moving the U.S. embassy is going to be at the U.S. State Department, where they just don't like this idea one little bit. And I think the president's a real estate executive. He knows how to get things built. My advice to him would be to move forward, select the site, do the planning, and start turning dirt as soon as possible. That, in effect, I think would really induce other countries to look at moving into West Jerusalem, which is where all of them would be, without prejudice to the ultimate outcome of the peace negotiations.
You know, on the other side of this, Dr. Parker, Turkey has announced that they are also going to move their consulate, I believe is what they call it, to Jerusalem, and this is their connection to Palestine. Does that indicate anything about the geopolitical or the regional political issues?
It indicates that this is a complex environment, and it's not going to get any easier anytime soon. When you look at the Sunni-Shia issues around the globe, when you look at what's going on in the Middle East right now, that's not going to change. So the reality is that the complexities are there, and you're going to continue to see countries decide whether or not they want to move their embassies to Jerusalem, or they want to keep them in other places.
All right, gentlemen, let's bring this together, because another issue on the table, North Korea, and that has been, we've seen a seed change in years, decades-long policy, at least since the 90s, in how we deal with North Korea. First to you, Ambassador Bolton. Russia now saying, and this came out in the news this morning, they're willing to be the broker of a deal between U.S. and North Korea. But from the historical track, what do we see, and where are we now with North Korea? Could Russia play a role?
Well, I think it would be a waste of oxygen. Look, we've negotiated with North Korea for 25 years. They've committed on at least 4 separate and distinct occasions to give up their nuclear weapons program in exchange for tangible benefits. They've lied every time they've made that commitment. There's simply no evidence that in year 26 the North Koreans are going to do this any differently. In fact, we've got tonight a very interesting comparison. Reuters has a story that says China's statistics show no oil exported to North Korea last month. But we've got papers published in the South Korean press overnight showing at least 30 examples of ship-to-ship transfers of oil between Chinese and North Korean vessels during the last couple of months. So this is something that we've been played by the North Koreans and played by the Chinese for a long time. I think we're still waiting for China to do something dramatic, but if it doesn't, we're faced with some very, very unpleasant choices unless you're prepared to see North Korea with nuclear weapons.
All right. So, Dr. Parker, you have been involved in this to some degree. You have traveled a great deal to brief others and talk about this issue. Walk us through the scenario of where we are now and what we should do or not do.
So this is a complex environment in the backyard of China, of South Korea, of Japan. And when you look at those 3 countries and what they're dealing with right now, if they do nothing, if we do nothing as a globe, and we allow North Korea to maintain their nuclear weapons program and advance them to the point that they're close to right now, what you're going to end up with is likely a nuclear South Korea, a nuclear Japan, and therefore a concerned China that increases their nuclear capability and their defense capability. But it gets better. It gets better because then Iran sees that North Korea, quote, got away with it. And now what you end up with a potential of nuclear weapons in and around the Gulf as well. And if that happens, you're going to end up losing control of that fissile material, and that's a very complicated problem. And we haven't even talked about the finances and issues on the impact of the economy yet.
Well, before we get to that, South Korea's view of this, specifically South Korea, where are we with them and where do they stand?
Well, South Korea is interesting because before you can talk about a unified Korea, you have to talk about a unified South Korea. And to talk about a unified South Korea, you have to ask the question of whether or not you want a unified peninsula, and then whether or not you want WMD within South Korea itself. If you talk to government officials over there, many of them will say that you need the nuclear capability in order to execute a mutual assured destruction capability from South Korea towards the North Koreans. And Japan would say the same thing.
All right, back to you, Ambassador. Are we at a new potential Cold War in modern form?
Well, I think we're at a critical point in terms of the 50-year effort to prevent the proliferation of weapons of mass destruction, because if we fail to stop North Korea, and they are very close to the ability to hit targets in the United States with thermonuclear weapons, then I think that effort will have crashed into complete failure, because it won't just be North Korea. They will sell these capabilities to anybody with hard currency, to Iran if they're not already doing work together on the nuclear side, to terrorist groups if they could come up with the money, to other nuclear weapon states. And then you're going to see this proliferation worldwide. It will be a much more dangerous world. Trump inherited this. He didn't create this situation, but it will be on his watch that we either stop it in North Korea or we face a real expansion of nuclear and actually biological and chemical weapons as well all around the world.
Dr. Bill Parker, CEO at the East-West Institute, and a great new book, Guaranteeing America's Security in the 21st Century. And Ambassador Bolton, you have been working hard to guarantee our security for many years. Thank you both, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, coming up, the Democrats are setting the stage to try and impeach President Trump. Yep, I said it. If they're successful in the 28 midterm elections, can you imagine this is what they're going to do? Plus, you won't believe the new low that the left just hit. Our panel reacts, and that is next on this special edition of Hannity.
I am proud to stand here with my friend, Congressman Gutierrez, with other Congress people who will be here in announcing that we are introducing articles of impeachment to remove President Trump from office.
His motives and his actions are contemptible, and I will fight every day until he is impeached. Impeach 45.
I rise today, Mr. Speaker, to call for the impeachment of the President of the United States of America.
The President's decision to end DACA was heartless and it was brainless.
The President's fitness for office is something that is being called into question. I'm very worried about his fitness.
And welcome back to this special edition of Hannity. Those were examples of Democrats this past year questioning President Trump's fitness for office, even calling for his impeachment. And it's not just Democrats relentlessly going after the president and his agenda. Liberals in the media have also reached another new low. In response to President Trump's emphasis on saying Merry Christmas, Newsweek on Christmas Eve published an article entitled, and I quote, "How Trump and the Nazis Stole Christmas to Promote White Nationalism." And listen to what CNN's Don Lemon recently said about the president's use of the very phrase, Merry Christmas.
This is a line that we have heard from Donald Trump many. Why does he continue? This is a dog whistle to the base because no one has ever stopped saying Merry Christmas.
You know, I forgot to bring my dog whistle. I usually have that on my radio show to blow whenever I hear that phrase. Joining us now with reactions, son of the late Supreme Court Justice Antonin Scalia and co-editor of the New York Times best-selling book Scalia Speaks, Chris Scalia, and also joining us, Fox News radio host Todd Starnes and author and attorney Danielle McLaughlin. Danielle, I've got to go to you first on this. As an attorney, make the case for impeachment of the president.
A president can be impeached for high crimes and misdemeanors. And as you and I both know, David, it's a political process, not a legal process. But
it requires a chargeable crime.
requires
here in the United States, it requires that.
A high crime or a misdemeanor. It has become, I think, the public expects the level of proof that you would see in a criminal offence. We need half of the House. We need 2/3 of the Senate. Even if the Democrats take back the House in 2018, I actually still think there's a pretty low chance of it happening.
Todd,
yeah, look,
the media's impeached him already, haven't they?
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, Don Lemon, who I've known for years, says it's a dog whistle. Dogs are barking everywhere.
So let me say something about Don Lemon, and quite frankly, CNN. Their entire network is a dog whistle for race-baiting anti-Trump bigots. I mean, it's 24/7. They really believe that Merry Christmas is a dog whistle. It makes me wonder what they think the words ho, ho, ho would be code for. But look, I want to go to this idea that Christmas is somehow, inclusive. Is that really true? Because you don't hear them talking about, well, Ramadan really needs to be more inclusive. This really is not about inclusivity, David. This is about marginalizing Christianity. So when President Trump said the words, we're gonna start saying Merry Christmas again, what he was trying to tell people was, you know what? I understand the true meaning of Christmas. Jesus is the reason for the season. That was the message that the president was trying to convey.
All right, Chris, let's bring you in on this because your father, a strict constructionist, a man who stood for the Constitution, defended the Constitution, weighed in often on First Amendment issues, unconstitutional issues. It's a tough question to say what would he say, but Scalia speaks, now the son of Scalia. Your take on this?
Well, I think, as you said, I'm not sure exactly what he would say about the war on Christmas in particular, but in Scalia Speaks, there are a number of speeches in which he expresses serious concern about narrowing space for public expression of religion. As my father saw it, he was an originalist, and he believed that the Constitution should be interpreted according to its original public meaning. And it was pretty clear to him that according to that original public meaning and tradition, and early practices in America, that it was totally okay for politicians and people in the public square to make religious statements and expressions. And my father was concerned that understanding was changing, and the room for for expressions of religion in the public square was getting smaller and smaller, in no small part because of the Supreme Court's own opinions, with which he often disagreed on in that front.
All right, so Danielle, looking at this from what Chris just said, and, whether you like the speech or don't like the speech, whether it's tweeted a certain way or offensive to some, this is part of what makes America great. That hate is protection speech, offensive speech or offense is not required or liked, but that doesn't rise to impeachment of a president. It may be an impeachment of character, according to some who disagree with him, but the Democrats are not making a good case here the way I see it.
No, and I know that you're a supporter of the president, and for many people who are, this is just political. But
I'm a supporter of the Constitution
first.
And
I absolutely am
as well. And statements that violate the principles of which the Constitution stands and exists and is written for, I think that's beneath, or I would think it would be beneath, our political, in this case, the president's opponents in Washington.
Sure. The only speech actually that the president could get impeached for is obstruction of justice. If there was a conversation that he had to shut down an investigation into him or others associated with the Russia investigation, that is actually speech that is not protected under the Constitution. So that is fundamentally speech that could be impeachable.
All right, Todd, you podcast. I love your podcast, by the way.
Thank you.
And you talk about this a lot. Free speech, Todd. And you and I have done it on my show, on your shows. I don't care what it is. I don't want to shut down anyone's right to do it, whether I agree or not. Is the left effectively shutting down free speech? Did free speech die at Berkeley in 2017?
I think it did. And we're in a very dangerous place in this country right now, David, because now the left says any speech we disagree with, well, we're going to make that hate speech. I want to go back to this idea that the Democrats are going to do whatever it takes to impeach the president. I believe that. We know that under the Obama administration, they weaponized the Internal Revenue Service. They weaponized the Department of Education.
They investigated James Rosen, Cheryl Atkinson,
That's right.
I mean, this was an administration and a government going after individuals.
They went after Billy Graham, America's pastor, for crying out loud. So do I think it's possible that they may have weaponized the FBI in addition to all of that? Absolutely, I do.
All right, Chris, back to you. And I want to bring something into this as a point of personal pride that I got to meet your father over a number of times. I think we have a picture of the two of us together at the White House Correspondents' Dinner. And, you know, the Scalia Speaks, when the book came out, a great way to kind of put his voice into the conversation. Just give you a few seconds here to talk about that.
It's a collection of speeches that my father delivered over the course of his career. My co-editor Ed Whalen and I really wanted to make this interesting and accessible to really every American interested in the law or in my father, not just lawyers or legal scholars. So there are plenty of speeches about the law, but there are speeches about sports, about hunting, about the values that Americans hold dear, about what makes an American, that it's about sharing certain values and beliefs in freedom and equality. So it gives a picture of my father as a man in full, not just a justice.
All right, Chris, I got to stop you there because we're up against the hard break. But thank you, Danielle, Todd. Great to see you. More of this special edition of Hannity after the break. Stay with us. And welcome back to Hannity. Unfortunately, that is all the time we have left this evening. Don't forget to set your DVR so you never miss an episode of Hannity. You can listen to my radio show Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. Eastern on SiriusXM Patriot. That's channel 125. You can follow me on Twitter at David Webb Show. Matter of fact, all things David Webb Show. Tomorrow, you'll catch us on Outnumbered. Katie Pavlich, she's here and she's filling in live for Laura Ingraham.
Thanks, David. Good to see you.